Hi. My name is Sarah Ha, and I have the humble pleasure of serving as a Senior Managing Director, of Teach for America's Asian American and Pacific Islander Initiative. A position that I undertook 2.5 years ago because I believe Teach for America could and should be doing more to advance the conversations of AAPI children and families and bring to the forefront their needs and experiences that are often rendered invisible, especially in our national dialogue around educational equity and social justice. I started this role because I was passionate about making the invisible visible. The most pivotal time in my life started with one teacher. When I was 6 and my sister was 5, we were sent to Busan, South Korea to live with my grandmother because my parents could not financially support us. When I came back, I was completely fluent in Korean, but lost my fluency in English as I entered 3rd grade. I recall the feeling of extreme bewilderment when my principal scolded me for not making eye contact with him. I was confused when I was taught not to look elders in the eyes as a sign of respect. I remember when Mrs. Girardi spoke to me, I could not understand a word. Instead of dismissing me, she found a tutor who spoke Korean. This tutor was a college student from Holy Cross and was the only other Korean person I met aside from my family. When the tutor started to speak Korean, then I started to understand what was happening. This experience highlighted how impactful it was to have a teacher that extended her role beyond the confines of the classroom. When she noticed that I was being bullied and had difficulty interacting with my peers because of not only the language barrier, but the trauma I experienced of being abused by the adults I was living with in Korea, and at school by a teacher who was allowed to practice corporal punishment. She had me stay in the classroom during recess. She introduced me to art, so I coped and communicated through art, which she then submitted to the local art museum and magazines. My confidence and self-worth grew over time, and I felt affirmed when I received a scholarship to attend art classes at the local museum and was published through magazines. I'm thankful for Mrs. Girardi, whose genuine care and talent had a strong influence on my early education and my personal growth. Maybe unbeknownst to her, she was participating in an active cultural responsive teaching. She helped cultivate some critical life skills that followed me to this day. Gang life in my neighborhood was prominent. In 6th grade, instead of joining one, I started one. I adopted the codes of gangs such as colors, signs, and tag names. My tag name was Lucky. The focus of our gang, Girls with Attitude, GWA, as I'd like to call it, was to provide service to the community. I would babysit with my peers, and we would read to children of immigrant parents so that they may attend their ELL courses in the evening. Looking back now, I realize that's when my leadership journey had started. And the belief in myself blossomed from the faith of one teacher in my potential. You all as educators have this power to put a person on a different path. Today, I'm proud that Teach for America is among the largest suppliers of AAPI teachers in our country, especially given that our AAPI students and families are among the fastest growing racial groups, growing over 4 times as rapidly as the US population and expected to double over 47 million by 2060. Despite this tremendous growth, AAPIs are one of the most understudied racial groups in this country. I'm particularly excited about moderating this panel because at its core, it is amplifying the AAPI narrative that we don't often hear about. And we are in this room today with an incredible group of leaders who have been working with many across the country to ensure that our community is elevated in our national dialogue around educational equity. Before introducing our full panel, I'd like to walk through a few slides so that we are operating from the same space. The model minority myth, the myth that all AAPIs are educated, wealthy, and successful, has been one of the most pervasive stereotypes for half a century. It is a stereotype that was used as a political tool to divert attention from the inequities AAPIs face and to pit our community against other marginalized groups. It harms our community that would otherwise benefit from programs and resources targeting vulnerable and underserved communities. And it masks how heterogeneous the group is, representing a wide array of demographics that span the socioeconomic, historical, linguistic, generation, cultural, and religious lines. The way that data is presented influences what we don't hear about AAPI kids coming from low-income backgrounds or who may be struggling in schools. In fact, here are some key indicators for the AAPI community. 69% of AAPI students are foreign-born. 1 in 6 Asian American students have limited English proficiency in the classroom. 11% of the 11 million undocumented immigrants in the US are Asian American. Among Asian American, high school and college graduation rates vary widely. For distinct groups, these rates are dramatically lower than the overall national rate of 81% for high school. You see here that only 50% of Burmese, 62% of Hmong and Cambodian, 66% of Laotian, 71% of Vietnamese, and 72% Burmese students graduate from high school. Similar education realities are experienced within the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities. However, one of the greatest challenges is that we need better data to report to ensure that their needs are brought to the surface. While our nation's racial demographics are rapidly more diverse, our public education data is playing catch-up to accurately identify the presence of large ethnic communities under the current aggregated data system. Our country has made significant strides in reporting disaggregated data about student achievement for major racial groups that has especially been important to reveal the opportunity gaps for African American and Latino students. However, reporting highly diverse categories such as Asian students in the aggregate masks serious disparities when Asian students comprise 48 ethnic groups and over 300 spoken languages. The needs of Southeast Asian American students who come from recent refugee and immigrant families are especially affected by being lumped into Asian category. In comparison to over 86% of the overall Asian American population, disaggregated data reveals that 66% of Cambodian, 66% Laotian, 63% Hmong, and 51% of Vietnamese Americans aged 25 and older are without a 2 or 4 year college degree. Within the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander community, 49% of Native Hawaiian, 58% of Tongan, 57% of Samoan, and 53% of Guamanian are without a 2 or 4 year college degree. I'll take this moment to quote Quinn, who will be joining us up here in a couple of minutes. She said, "Data has the power to reveal and the power to conceal. Data has the power to reveal and the power to conceal." For too long, the true challenges of Asian American students from kindergarten to high school have been masked by combining all Asian American students under one category. We also need to unearth the data that overlooks the needs that exist in our Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander community. And I'm so excited that our group of esteemed speakers here today will shed some light on that today. We are so fortunate to have a teacher with us today in this dialogue, a Teach for America Corps member, a teacher for whom advocacy for AAPI students had become a passion through her experience with a student this year. Some of you may recognize Arlene Sanchez from the One Day magazine. Arlene will introduce us to her student, Kan Huynh, to ground ourselves in the experience of our students and who will help set the stage for our time together this morning. Arlene, would you please come up?
Good morning. I'm gonna just name it. I'm very emotional. And I was talking to one of the panelists and I'm like, my voice is shaky, not because I'm nervous, but because I'm just like, talking about these things gets me really passionate and emotional, and everything's just like really raw right now. So I have the distinct pleasure of actually introducing one of my own personal heroes, Miss Kan Huynh. I also have the honor of saying that I was her 8th grade English teacher last year. And since her crossing the stage at graduation in Boston City Hall in 2015, I am very proud of the achievements that have come out from Kan. Today, I have decided to focus my attention on the facts that actually make Kan extraordinary. The facts that allow us to see how she diverges from the narrative her American counterparts often expect her to fit into. Kan is a definition, in my eyes, of perseverance in the face of struggles. Upon arriving to the States at the age of 9, Kan had to readjust to a new life, one she was not used to as a result of her 7 years away from her mother and her siblings. She soon realized her new life meant she was now the oldest daughter of a Vietnamese mother who worked 7 days a week in order to place food in front of her kids and a roof over their heads. This also meant she had to learn the new ways, talk the talk and walk the walk of a country she now called home, which was America. In a classroom of 26 students, when she was my student, Kan was one of 2 Asian students in my class. 2. For an Asian student in my school, and in most schools in Boston, this wasn't an uncommon ratio. And that's sad, considering my school is situated very close. It's in Dorchester. We have a huge community of Vietnamese students very nearby, so it is a shocker. At the age of 13, Kan entered my English class as a student who was still developing proficiency in the language she was forced to learn in order for her and her mother to survive in this country. Even after 4 years in the US, Kan still struggled to conjugate verbs, write incomplete sentences, and communicate cohesive ideas. She struggled to speak up in class, simply because she feared she would be judged, or she feared being wrong. And in my class, it's just like, speak up, girl, be confident, right? But she feared it. She felt wildly inadequate, an experience that I can actually relate to, as also growing up as an ESL student. I'm Latina, and my parents are immigrants from the Dominican Republic, and I can understand that fear. This was also mostly out of fear that she wouldn't meet the expectations many of her peers had, perhaps not consciously, because sometimes it's not conscious, of her and other Asian students in the building and just generally. Asian students are supposed to be smart, right? And Kan experienced all the anxiety that is expected when you are forced to replicate a stereotype that is just like unfair and unrealistic, to be honest. So a few times now, I've actually talked to Kan. We've been on the phone with her all morning because she wasn't able to fly in today. I told her that if I wasn't a decade older than her, and if I hadn't taught her English and had been her teacher, I would want to be her bestie, because I think she's actually really cool. Simply because she embraces the struggles that America has placed in front of her and her family with such grace. And her story compels us to challenge the myth that all of our Asian students are universally successful and do not face many of the same challenges that our Black and Latino students also face. They do. I hope her story today inspires you, as it has inspired me time and time again, to continue this culturally responsive pedagogy in my classroom. And without further ado, I introduce to you my cool and my not so small anymore student, Kan.
Good job, thanks, Arlene.
At the age of 9, I moved to Boston. The dream of immigrant had come true. The American dream was in me. The dream of making new friends. The dream of having my own tree house and a dog that lived in his own doghouse. And all the dream that television had put in my mind. But all my dream had crushed when I finally realized I didn't feel like I belonged here. Because in Vietnam, people looked like me and spoke the same language as I did. I felt like I was a part of something. Here there's just so many differences and so many different races. I wanted to know everything about everyone because they are just so different from me. But at the same time, I want to keep myself away from them because I was feared that they may judge me based on who I am. Miss Angels gave me the opportunities to find my own voice and let me know that speaking my own mind was okay. Growing up as the only Asian student in a full community of Hispanic and Black, I thought of myself as diverse. But recently, as I begun to look into private school, a different reality hit me. In the eyes of admission office, Hispanic and Black students are the only one who include as diverse. And it seemed like they overlooked Asian students. When people looked at me, they didn't see a young girl who grew up in Vietnam and immigrated to America. They didn't see a girl who grew up in a poor neighborhood in Boston. They only saw my own skin color, their own preconceptions. My message to you today is to be open-minded and embrace a different culture and different background that different students bring in, and look for the deeper story of every one of them. Thank you.
We're still very excited that Khan is going to be able to join us. So if you do see her later this afternoon when she finally flies in, please take a moment to stop and thank her for sharing her truth and to applaud her for her bravery, her persistence, and the strength that she embodied in sharing her story here today. So I'd like to invite up Arlene back to the stage along with our other speakers. Joining Arlene, I'm excited to introduce to you my friend Quindon, who I quoted earlier. Quinn has been a pioneer leading the advocacy for the growth of data disaggregation work for more than 5 years, first starting out as the policy director of the Southeast Asia Resource Action Center, and now as their current executive director. Oh, and you can all come up. Joining Quinn is Tana Lepule, who's the Executive Director of Empowering Pacific Islander Communities, who brings over a decade of experience working with the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities, and are at the helm of leading policy, research, and programs to fuel transformational change in the NHPI community. And we have Akhil Vora, who is our Senior Advisor at the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. He oversees education, bullying, and data portfolios and had also led efforts with the President's Advisory Commission on AAPIs and civil rights. Now you'll have the opportunity to hear from our experts in the field who will share through their own personal stories or the work that they do through their organizations, why this work matters and should be a priority for educators like you. So the first question is for all the panelists, and we'll go from Arlene down the table. So as we get started, we want to get to know you a little bit more personally. Tell us your secrets. As you think back on your personal life and your personal path, can you share a story for a moment that was influential in leading you to the work you do today?
So again, good morning. I think for me, the defining moment it pops in my mind every time I feel like I get the question, because I talk to my kids about it too, was the moment I entered college. So I went to an all-women's college, Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts. And it was interesting, because when I went to college, it was like a huge slap in the face, right? Very different than what I was used to. I came from a community, went to BPS, Boston Public Schools, where everyone I saw and talked to looked like me, spoke like me, came from families that were like my family. My family migrated from Dominican Republic to the States. I was an ESL student, and still today I struggle with pronouncing some words, and that's okay. But I think at the end of the day, when I went to college, I was expecting more of an inclusive community, a community that looked like me, potentially spoke like me, and understood my struggle. And it was actually the complete opposite. I ended up almost failing out of my freshman year of college and became really depressed because I, like Khan, had a lot of issues of like acceptance of myself and also feeling very inadequate. I was surrounded by primarily white students who came from very wealthy backgrounds, unlike me, and a lot of the freshman courses that I was taking were also, like my high school curriculum, not affirming of who I was, and that was troubling for me. When I would sit in class, I would struggle to speak up, and I would struggle to feel like my voice wanted to be heard. And because of that, I uncovered this like deep anger with education. I was angry because I was never made aware of the inequalities in education in the way that it hit me when I finally entered college. And why was it that I had to wait until I experienced it firsthand for me to realize, like, there are things happening here that I don't understand or have the language for. I wanted to go back and teach and talk to my students about the systemic issues and the institutional barriers that are real for all of us and oftentimes are not placed in front of us when we are in high school or in middle school, right? Not early enough. So we can start thinking about who we are and forming our own identities and understanding how to fight back or how to break from those chains, right? And I finally felt like I could break from my chains when I started majoring in sociology and asking more questions about me. And that was powerful. And I wanted to give my kids that language and that understanding of themselves before they entered a space that was gonna hit them across the head. And I wouldn't want them to get hit across the head, right? So, but I think that's where my passion and anger comes from.
Thank you, Arlene. And thank you, Sarah, for creating this space and this opportunity to really build in community together. It actually kind of took my breath away to come up here and see this room full of AAPI leaders, allies, and just amazing change makers. So thank you for this opportunity. Are there folks who are going to be at the AAPI brunch tomorrow? Okay, that's a big amount of people. So I didn't want to like replicate the same story. So I'll actually stick with the story that I had originally planned. The story I'd like to share is actually my first memory of school. I remember being led by my teacher of a Head Start program in Orange County to this playground with like this cement tunnel thing with sand in it. She sat me down next to another student, and I realized looking at the student that I had no idea what was going on, and I did not understand a single word that was coming out of her mouth. I started to think that, I'm okay, I guess I'm okay here. So I started looking around, I started talking with her, and when I looked around, I realized that there was no one around me, and that my new friend had left. And so for me, this experience was so terrifying, to be introduced into a school environment where I grew up as a child of refugees, not knowing a single word of English, and being introduced to this new community and this new space that would become the foundation of my educational experience for my entire life. And I was so blessed to actually have the first Vietnamese teacher in that Head Start. This was in the early 80s when we were seeing the first influx of Vietnamese refugees to America. And reflecting back, I realized how privileged and how honored I was to actually have this Vietnamese American woman be my bridge into this world. And when I think about the work that CREC does to amplify the narratives of Southeast Asian American realities across this nation and to try to create systemic change across this nation, it is those stories that I try to uplift and that I try to shed light onto in ensuring that the realities of our students and our families are really being understood, being recognized, and are really leading the charge in creating the communities that we want to see.
Thanks, Gwen. Thanks to all of you to being here today. I'm going to go back even further. So I guess my story is kind of consistent with what the president has said about the role of education. And since day one, he said that the surest path to get into the middle class is obtaining a college degree. My parents are from India. My grandparents barely had an elementary school education, but they really inculcated the importance of obtaining a high school education and a college degree to all of their children. And my parents were blessed enough to be the first to go to college in their families and pursue graduate degrees. And they kind of pushed me in that same direction. But at the same time, the community where my parents are from, we're in a religious minority. So for many folks, it's difficult to get to school. There's a lot of religious discrimination, and it's difficult for folks to get even a basic elementary school education. So my grandfather started a school where they would pay for all of the students, including living in rural areas, an opportunity to come in and be educated. He passed away years ago, but they've continued the work, and they're actually fundraising to finalize that school now. And I think that really drives me to understand that the whole movement, the whole push for getting students through high school, through college and beyond is really about justice. And it really is about, it's a civil rights question. And that's the reason why I became an attorney, and that's the reason why I continue this work. And I recognize that I'm privileged, I'm lucky that my parents gave me an opportunity in this country and to receive an education, and I want to make sure that I do this work day in and day out to make sure that other folks have an opportunity. And I'll leave with one last story. And it's not just one story that defines us, right? It's these series of experiences throughout our lives. Last summer, I had an intern. Her name was Mai Ka Vang. And just one of the phenomenal intern, just did the work, was great. And I started talking to her. And she's like, I'm Hmong. And if folks are not familiar, Hmong community, when you look at the data, these folks are definitely, we're talking about very low educational attainment for the most part, many times refugee communities. I grew up in a family of my sister and I, right? My dad's a physician, my mom had a college degree, but took care of us at home. We were lucky. She came over as a refugee. She has 9 siblings. The father works, a job. The mother stays at home. She moved twice. She went to 4 different high schools. Then she had to take care of all of her other siblings while growing up, and I just couldn't believe it. But these are the issues that students are dealing with these days, and that's why, I think all of us collectively, day in and day out, are trying to do the best we can to make sure that they receive the support so they have a fair shot at the American dream. Thank you.
Hello. Talofa. Yeah, you're probably more familiar with aloha, right? All right, well, thank you for this opportunity. I'm a behind the scenes, in the grounds kind of guy, so being up here in this kind of environment and wearing pants is uncomfortable for me. And I have to do things properly, given that we're in an API kind of environment. And I want to start off with Muamua si'atu le alofa le atua. Muamua si'atu le alofa le atua. And that is, I'd like to give thanks to our Heavenly Father for this opportunity that I've been given. So there you go, I got that out the way. The other thing too is, as a Pacific Islander, I have to come bearing gifts. But because we also have a budget cut limit, I only have one, but it's gonna be in the question of participation. How many teachers in here? Raise your hands.
Woo!
Okay, put them back down. How many of you have a Pacific Islander student? Raise your hand. Okay, put it down. How many of you know the ethnicity of that student? All right, you in the green shirt, gentlemen, what is that ethnicity? Tongan. Oh. So I want to say thank you for acknowledging that and knowing that. Please come up. I wish send it. And I just want to say thank you to all of you teachers, and I want to acknowledge that, but also because I don't have enough gifts, this is for you. And it's kukuile. And the history of that is back in the days, we used to drill holes in those, and there was like little string and there's oil inside. That used to be the light. And so I want to give that to you so that you can be the light for that student. So thank you. So my name is Tana Lepule, short for Yonatana, which is Jonathan in the Samoan language. And I want to start off also with that I am not a gangster. I am not a football player. I am not a bouncer. I am a handsome Samoan gentleman who's passionate about his work. I'm also a son of a minister. One of the phrase Samoans there's a lot of phrase and stories within those different phrases. But the one that stood out for my dad is I lost both my parents. My dad when I was in 4th grade, my mom after I finished college. But the foundation was built with the teachings of my parents. So those of you who in this room who are not teachers, raise your hands. Okay, so I want you to put it back down and raise your hands when I say, who are teachers in the room? Who are teachers in the room? Because all of us are teachers in the room, no matter what setting it is, in the classroom, in the streets, in the hood, in the professional work that you work, we are all teachers. The word that stands out, or the phrase from my dad was, ole ala I le pule, ole tautua. Ole ala I le pule, ole tautua. And that is the pathway through service is through your leadership. So it's on us to take that ownership. The experience as a young Samoan boy, obviously I had size. So I was a bully. I was also a comedian. Pacific Islanders were always laughing. So it's almost like an oxymoron, a comedic bully, you know? But I can tell you the turning point was 2nd grade. My 2nd grade teacher, Miss Weaver, she said, Tana, why don't you take that energy and focus it to the positive? And again, being a son of a minister, I realized, you know what am I doing? Why am I picking on kids? Why did I make that kid bring me now-laters every week? Why did I make him, you know? So I just kind of reframed the kind of strength or the empowerment that I had. And I would say that was the beginning of my turnaround of being a bad person to being a good person and leads to who I am today, which is an advocate for our communities. The other thing, too, is, let's see. Just a brief history on my high school journey is, I did play football. Those are like naturally given talents, I think, that we take advantage of. But I can say that, the high school that I was at was sports politics. So I only maintained a 2.0 during football season. The rest of the time, I was, not a student. I didn't go to class. But the politics of sports kept me in. But at the same time, reflecting back, that actually damaged who I was as a student, damaged who I was to be empowered. I was empowered for the wrong reasons, seeing shortcuts, realizing that the system can work for me. Moving on to my college days, again, having that history. My first year in college, I had a 0.9 GPA. Again, the habits that I brought with me from high school, I had a 0.9 GPA. I didn't even have an F, I had a G average, I think they call it back then. So I was a G in the wrong way. I must say my class ring from San Diego State says 1996. I actually didn't finish till 1997. So that journey was quite interesting, but I stayed the course. And I went from what I can share today, a 0.9 GPA, to 7 years later with a 2.7 GPA. So give me some love. And so the reason I do what I do is because, do we have any fellow Native Hawaiians in here? Native Hawaiians? Woo-hoo! That's about right. That's about the percentage, right? So I want to say thank you to my sister over there. Thank you for showing some representation for us. But as I close, I want to leave with this, another Samoan proverb, and it's "Esili letai ilona taupuai," and that is that the people up front here are no more important than those who are out in the audience, those who are supporting, those who are leading by ways of, you can stay at my house when you come over. So I want to close with that and just say that, please excuse, and I forgot to do my disclaimer, which is all comments, emotions, and facial expressions are that solely of this Samoan gentleman. So thank you.
Thank you. Man, I selfishly want to hoard all of your time so we can continue talking story and take over Teach for America's 25th Anniversary Summit. But unfortunately, because of our limited time, we can't go into full case stories of each of your work. But this one is for Quinn, Tana, and Akil. Could you describe in a minute or less what problem your organization is trying to seek to solve and how?
So CREC's mission is to advance the interests of Vietnamese, Cambodian, and Laotian Americans through policy, advocacy, capacity building, and leadership development. Our vision is that when we grew as an organization in 1979, Our mission was to serve the immediate resettlement needs of refugee communities. And our vision now is to really move towards looking at equitable, long-term policy solutions that move towards social justice.
Thank you.
Okay, so at the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, we're actually mandated by the president to ensure that the doors of the federal government are open to Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. So there are a few things that we focus on. We actually focus on everything, but I'll try to name 4 main items. One is language access, recognizing that 1 in 3 Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are limited English proficient. In what ways is the federal government ensuring that programs and services are open to the community? Second, data disaggregation, which we'll get into later. Not all Asians are the same, as Sarah kind of indicated with some of the data sets earlier, but unfortunately, how we look at Asians in the media, at the federal level, oftentimes we're all lumped into one category, which doesn't really get to some of the inequities for some of the communities. The third piece is federal employment. If you really want to change structures, you need to have representation, right? So we want to make sure that the federal government looks like the rest of the United States. So ensuring that Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are represented in all different agencies, from interns all the way to the highest levels. And the last is capacity building. How are we, the federal government, doing a better job in helping nonprofits, community organizations, AAPI communities across the United States and territories with grants, with programs, with opportunities, with outreach, with representing them on civil rights? So those are just a few of the main tenets that we're kind of focusing on right now.
Okay, I'm with EPIC, Empowering Pacific Islander Communities. Our mission statement is to promote social justice by engaging our Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders to advocate for culturally relevant through research, development, and capacity building. In short, the work we do is to try to empower our DAM communities to be active and to do something about it. Because a lot of times we're asking, what can you do for me? What can you do for our communities? Why don't we get this? Well, our focus and our reframing of things is like, then why don't we just try to do something ourselves in the meantime? EPIC's main focus really is around data disaggregation, because until you disaggregate that data, unfortunately, we're lumped under that umbrella of Asian and Pacific Islander, and that definitely does unjust to communities like South Asians and Pacific Islanders. It doesn't capture the true struggles that are, when you disaggregate the data, it shows that Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders, far, if not equal to some of our ethnic cousins like the African American communities, are just at the same levels or worse, further off. So as Pacific Islander and EPIC, it was a movement of just young professionals who wanted to do what we can for our communities. 98% of our Pacific Islander organizations are in direct service and doing work around health, but we felt that the niche for EPIC is kind of being that advocate, and like Akil mentioned earlier, it's just seeking partners that are out there who can kind of help us, because we're not at the table a lot of the time. So who do we have in the system or at certain tables that can either be that voice for us or at least even introduce us sometimes? And I can say definitely to the White House Initiative has been a true ally for our communities in both hearing who we are and utilizing us for the strength that we have.
Great. Thank you, Tana. So Arlene, it's been clearly evident that you've been passionate about overcoming the model minority myth through the experience of Khan, with whom you connected with deeply. In just a minute or two, can you describe how the model minority myth has just been that, a myth in the life of your student?
Yeah, definitely, and I actually mentioned a little bit of that in my speech in introducing Khan as a student. I think in the back of our minds, sometimes subconsciously or consciously, we kind of have this, and I'm going to generalize, but thinking about my students who are not Asian American or Pacific Islander, have this myth of how Khan was supposed to act in class. I think Khan would tell me sometimes, yeah, I don't feel comfortable sharing, or I don't feel comfortable someone reading out my piece, or she wouldn't like me reading her writing because she'd fear that it doesn't meet my expectations of what I would expect from a student like her. Right, student like her being Asian and Vietnamese. And I think that when we think about Khan as a representation of a lot of the Asian students in our school, similar to all the issues, academic issues and battles my students were fighting who were not Asian, Khan was also fighting the same struggle. And I think that in thinking about how I had those conversations in class, it was really important for my students to recognize what does the collective struggle look like. I wanted my student who was Black or Latino or of any other underrepresented group to understand that, like, as a people, and as we're together in this space because we all share something, and that is, like, you come from potentially a low-income community that's neighboring our school. You are a person of color, and it's important to understand that, like, although there are many things that divide us as people in this space, there are so many things that make us one. And through my curriculum, it was so important for them to learn about that collective struggle. I'm an English teacher, so it's so important for me to use literature as a tool to empower and free our students from the mental incarceration I feel like they often have because of the stereotypes that are imposed on them and because of what they see in the media. And it was so important for me to have, and I wasn't specifically talking just about Asian students in my curriculum, but mostly about understanding the self and understanding the things that are out there that you need to work toward dispelling. And I think in general, that kind of, does that answer the question? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I do have a follow-up.
Yeah.
What types of realization did you
Have about what's missing from the standard American curriculum and the kinds of efforts required of a teacher to teach in a culturally responsive way.
I love your question. And I'm going to start with this. I actually began the year this year with telling my students, we're all like Plato. I got 2 questions. Who's Plato? And the second question was, why? And I said, well, all of us live in a cave, right? We all have this, like, singular experience. And for many of my kids, for me, it is so important that I don't keep them in that cave, and that cave for many years has been replicated. We all teach the way we were taught, right? And if we are replicating that same kind of teaching, it's a system that is antiquated, right? It's a system that only serves and affirms a particular reality and individual, and that being, like, the white experience, the victors, right? And not often replicates and affirms the experiences of our kids. And when I say our kids, the kids that I teach, the demographic that I teach in Boston. And many times, even, like, after going to Smith and realizing, like, oh shoot, like, I still haven't made it out of my cave, like, I still don't understand who I am, right? It's been a conversation, and every time I feel like students are giving up on this, I'm like, you're still figuring yourself out, and we're gonna do this together. So I feel like in education, there's a huge blind spot around, like, how do we educate all of our kids, not just some? And I think that we become so complacent with the way our curriculum currently works, and year after year, I feel like we're teaching the same books, the same math books, the same science books, the same, and I was talking to a woman last night who was at the conference. She actually does CRT work, culturally responsive teaching work, with a region somewhere in the South. And she said, well, you know, you gotta think about it. It's uncomfortable to think about stretching beyond what we already have. And beyond that, right, like, the people who are writing these books have had their identity confirmed for years upon years, and, you know, having to rewrite books and thinking about new ways to teach our kids, it's too much work, right? So we'd rather not, and she was saying it sarcastically, right? But I think thinking about, like, yes, it will take work to redefine what good teaching looks like. And if our kids are leaving our classrooms not empowered and having a sense of self, then we're not teaching. If we're not empowering kids to go into their communities and, like, lift their communities up from, like, not the bootstraps, but from the ground, right? And, like, dismantling all these things that they believe about themselves and their families, then, like, we're not teaching. And I think it's so important for my kids to walk away from a room and say, like, I feel empowered, not because I can pass a state exam, but because I believe in myself and I understand myself enough to, like, fight. Like, I want my kids to, like, want to fight. So I get passionate talking about it, but I think it's so important.
You're getting me passionate. Can we give her some snaps? Oh my gosh.
I just want to say, like, I honestly feel like the district can move in the right direction if these conversations are had more often. And I think we have to reconsider the way we hire teachers. What kind of mindsets are we placing in front of these kids? We just need to empower from all corners. So culturally responsive pedagogy is a statement. It's something that you can throw around, but are you doing it? And if you say so, like, how are you doing it actively every day? Do you walk away from your classroom saying, today my kids learn to respect themselves a little bit more, learn to love themselves a little bit more? And that is real education. That is the power of an educator standing in front of these kids.
You got me fired up, girl. Seriously.
Count me on
And
your
I'm
fight.
I'm like, I'm ready to fight. I'm like ready to jet out that door and start fighting. But I am so grateful that we have your voice and your leadership in the classroom and in your school and your district. Thank you so much for your service and your leadership. So this question is for Quinn and Tana. Could you each describe 2 of the top challenges in your communities?
So before I answer that question, can I ask for how many folks was the information that Sarah provided, the data and statistics on education attainment, how much of that information was, for how many folks was that new information? So we're in a room of very, very educated advocates who have a very deep understanding of the data that is being presented around these educational outcomes and really disparities that we're seeing systems-wide, community-wide. So to help, I think, really honor what you're sharing, Arlene, I think it is so important, and you all recognize how important it is to understand who our students are and where they come from. So I think the only thing I'll share, which is different from the data that you've shared actually, and thank you for presenting that, is that the needs of Southeast Asian American students are so similar to other students of color, and yet their narratives are not known. And so one point I'll talk about is generational poverty. All Southeast Asian Americans have a higher proportion of living in poverty than compared to the US family. So I'll just give an example. The Hmong community, for example, has the highest rates of poverty, 27%. So when you look at median income, median household income of a Hmong American family is $12,000 compared to $28,000 for the average American family. So just think about what $12,000 for an entire family means that young people have parents who are working multiple jobs, like Khan's, who are doing their best to survive, doing everything that they can to put food on their table. And it means that education systems really need to do a little bit more to reach our parents where they're at. Evenings, weekends, and thinking about partnerships with community-based organizations, for example. We talked about limited English proficiency for our students. And I think what's really interesting is that when you actually look at K through 12 data, 2 of the top 5 languages of ELL speakers in the nation are Vietnamese and Hmong, consistently. And our students are distributed across the entire nation in every single region. So we see that 34 states have at least one AAPI language spoken within the top 5 ELL student community, and that 7 states actually report 2 or more languages. And these states are actually from the Midwest and the South. So Iowa, Nebraska, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Minnesota, and Arkansas, communities who have not traditionally been thought of as states where you resettle a lot of immigrant and refugee communities. So what does it mean for the teacher workforce to be able to be trained and to be able to have the knowledge that they need to really work with these students? And I think an issue that we really don't talk a whole lot about is actually implicit bias. So for African American and Latino communities, so often do we hear about how implicit bias results in really criminalizing our young people, super harsh school disciplinary measures, versus what it means for AAPI students, what it means for Khan, what it meant for me, where silence did not mean understanding. Silence meant being lost, it meant being confused, it meant being scared. And when you actually look at the data around how educators interpret this, one of my heroes is Pitsumai Ui. She's a professor at the University of Boston, Lowell. She did a study of a school in Lowell, which was very diverse in terms of its student body. And she saw in classroom observations that for the AAPI students in her classroom, the educator did not look at their student even once. Even once. So when we think about what it means to be recognized, to be understood as a young person in this huge institutional system, and system-wide to know that there are these biases that prevent our young people from really being seen. What does that mean for us as a community, and what does it mean to move forward?
Thank you.
Sorry, what was the question?
Can you describe the top 2 to 3 challenges of your community?
Okay, for our community, health is definitely one, but that's like the standard across a lot of our communities. So I want to leave that out. That's not one of my 2. For EPIC and our communities, as we feel we're kind of the fresh eyes for our communities, because a lot of our folks are direct service folks, but we feel that the piece that was missing in our communities was research, development, and advocacy, and that's kind of one of the areas. But I would say specifically data disaggregation and civic engagement, and I think both play a perfect kind of role for each other. I want to share a little bit about the importance of data disaggregation. Again, being under, still to this day, even some of the federal agencies still haven't broken out that title or that umbrella of Asian and Pacific Islanders. So part of our task and our duty is to call folks out like that. I'm the diplomatic squeaky wheel. I'll do it nice, but if we need to send somebody, Akil knows, we have somebody who can go in there, drop some F-bombs if you want to. But I think the key part in that is finding your advocates within your own, whether it's profession, find the teachers who are passionate and dynamic and ready to call out the system, to those who are willing to diplomatically try to work the politicking side of things. Build that base of advocates. Build that base of kind of friends and heroes and champions. I forgot what the quote comes from. Keep your friends close, keep your damn enemies closer. Kind of that mentality of strategery, if that's a word. So data disaggregation, because we know, and within our own communities, we know the anecdotal stories, but a lot of times when you're applying for funds, specifically for some of the underserved communities, it's all about the data. How can you justify why you need funds to do the work that you do? Data disaggregation, again, it has its pros and its cons. It says, for example, we're all healthy as Asians and Pacific Islanders. But if you break out the data, and I'm going to have to look at my cheat sheet here, you get things like 20% of Pacific Islander community members are diagnosed with heart disease. That in the world of obesity, don't judge me. In the world of obesity, 35% compared to 28% of the U.S. total population. Diabetes, 15% of Pacific Islanders diagnosed with diabetes versus the 9% of the U.S. general population. So we feel that data disaggregation is very important because it helps to create that story, or it helps to justify the stories that we do know as we move forward with grants and so on. The other thing I want to talk about is the civic engagement. We truly feel that unless we get involved, we talk about the system. Well, how about we try working to get ourselves into the actual system? Mm-hmm. And I can share perfectly that our closest is we have a few who's run, and I think we even have a mayor somewhere in the U.S. that's of Pacific Islander descent. Currently, Tulsi Gabbard, as a proud Samoan, she's Indian and Samoan. Talk about allies there with regards to reaching some of the philanthropy groups. We work, closely with our advocates over at the initiative, so they help to kind of be that voice for us. And we hold each other accountable. They, just quickly some of the things they'll say, "Get your shit together," and we'll say, "Okay, we'll get it together," but then we're going to hold you to it once we get that together. One thing I want to highlight with regards to what we're doing to addressing civic engagement is that we have a program called Pilot, Pacific Islander Leaders of Tomorrow, and we're working with college students who are already in that pipeline. We have other services that go from high school to college, but we're working specifically with those. And that's it's your standard leadership development, but I think the uniqueness in that is that we add culture to that. Mm-hmm. And I want to tell folks, everybody, please bring culture to the classroom. Bring culture to the classroom. That's just going to enhance the learning experience, both as a student and the learning experience as a teacher too. Through that week-long institute, we talk about leaders that we have within our own communities, like around STEM. We have a master navigator, Marshallese gentleman, who taught the ancient ways of sailing in the Pacific Islanders and worked closely with our Native Hawaiian communities to reteach those skills that involve math, involve navigating the stars. I joke around when I tell my friends, you know, like during the day, oh, I can't get there because I don't have the stars to help me navigate. But now we have things like Google Maps and all that. So those are modernized tools. The others too is just about how culture can be a resource is like around, you know, civil rights. We had the Mao movement in American Samoa, or in Samoa, where, you know, you talk about a perfect example of peaceful protest. Samoan gentleman who stood up against the occupants at the time, but was able to show that, you know, we're not savages. We can peacefully protest. So things like, you know, STEM leaders. You know, we had our own peaceful protests. We have great leaders here in the history books, but we don't touch upon or acknowledge some of those that we have in the different communities that we work with, that we teach, and that we're taught by. What else? I know we had limited time there. I just want to, you know, end again with just bring culture to the classroom. That's just going to enhance everybody's experience, the student and the teacher itself. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So Akhil, in your role, you serve as a bridge of policy and practice. You hear what's happening in the field and report that back to the White House. Can you share with us a little bit more about one or two promising practices of data disaggregation to give us all hope for systemic change in the room? We'd love to hear a couple of things from you on that end.
Sure, and I'll tailor my comments more in the education space. Just a quick note, though, I think with the passage of the Affordable Care Act, it now mandates greater granular data collection for AAPI communities. So we have a better sense of AAPI communities and their needs. So there's continued work done in a variety of areas, including health and small business, that I think are critically important for the AAPI community and all communities. But in the education space, I think, not surprisingly, we're seeing action being taken by states and localities that have high AAPI populations, right? I think they're starting to realize we have this community coming in, and they're starting to grow. What are their specific needs? So where are we seeing data disaggregation occur in the education context? Hawaii, California, Washington, St. Paul, Minnesota, right, with a huge Hmong population, and a couple of other folks, other places across the United States. In addition, we're starting to see legislation being passed. So legislation being introduced in New York, California, which was struck down, but I know a lot of the advocates in California are now meeting with the governor to talk about that, including some other areas. So it's great that this is now actually occurring. And I would say, let me highlight a specific example of what occurred in Hawaii. What they did was, Hawaii's mandate is to really focus on the native Hawaiian population, but they weren't necessarily collecting information about that community and other subgroups, including Filipino Americans, which are a very high number. They counted everybody again. So now they're collecting this information, and they're sharing it between K through 12 and higher ed. And that's huge, right? Because you have a student, and you're following him along, they graduate, and you're like, see you later. And you're not understanding what the student's needs were, you know, what are the growth patterns, where do they, you know, they just kind of drop off the face of the earth. So they're doing more on the longitudinal side of tracking students all the way through. And they're starting to develop interventions that are focused much more on cultural history. So there's a big focus on Native Hawaiian language, right? So let's bring back Native Hawaiian language. Let's see if that's assisting us in the pedagogy, and it's actually showing great outcomes. You're seeing retention rates soar, you're seeing graduation rates be higher. So we're starting to understand a little bit more about, okay, the data was helpful because it showed us the disparities, and now we've actually implemented specific measures that are keeping our students in school and on track to graduate. And I'll just leave it at that, Sarah, in terms of kind of what's happening in the field at least. So I would say for you folks in terms of an action item, if you're in another place across the United States, start thinking about that. Like, oh, is my LEA doing anything on data collection? Maybe I should ask. Where's the information going? Or is my state doing anything? And definitely, if you look up iCount, that's the organization, the entity that we are partnering with to kind of engage with this work.
And we'll share out resources about all of their work after the panel. Thank you so much, Akhil. You also answered the follow-up question I had. I'd like to take this moment to open the floor up for a Q&A for our panelists. if there are folks in the audience who would like to come up to the mics to ask any questions of our experts here on stage, please do so.
Hi, my name is Yuna. I'm a 2011 New York City Corps member. And I just want to thank all of you so much. This is the first panel at the summit that I've attended that featured API speakers. So it's very inspiring and awesome to see you guys up there. So thank you so much. My question is about what do you feel like you personally do or in your work that is helping Asian American and Pacific Islander educators and students both be successful within society as is, right, and finding success in the world that we presently live in, and also then disrupting and sort of dismantling the system and really getting attention to our differing groups? Where do you find yourself in your work in that sort of difficult dichotomy?
I can go. So I mentioned the program that we have called Pilot, Pacific Islander Leaders of Tomorrow. And because we believe in being civically engaged, instead of complaining about the problem, be part of the problem so you can complete that, so you can take care of that. A lot of, like within our week-long institution, we talk about being involved. And civic engagement is not just about going and voting, or running for office. It's also about like contributing, whether you're a $5 level contributor to a candidate. Civic engagement is also just like your own, like within a classroom, maybe during I'm sure everybody has the multicultural day at their school, but how can we be more intentional about utilizing that to educate not only our own, like our students or the teachers, but the institution, like the principal, who could possibly be that advocate at the administrative level and taking back. So it's about infiltrating, we like to think of it as like a battle plan. It's infiltrating at multiple levels, whether it's local, state, federal, or finding allies. To us, it's about empowering our communities to see the system, to see the struggles from the community level, but not just to see it, but what's the plan that we can kind of put together to address those. And a lot of times to change the system, you have to be a part of the system. So how do we create that kind of pathway or that pipeline to running for local office, running for the PTA, for those. So just, I think for us, it's about educating where can we put ourselves in the path of empowerment. Because, the systems have been in place for many years. A lot of it, I would say, even works against communities of color. So how do we get into those systems so that we can start to begin those change? Because I think we have a wealth of people who are doing that change at the multiple levels, but one of the hardest ones to break into is definitely the system kind of thing.
We operate at a different level. I mean, we're not a community-based organization. I mean, we're the federal government, but I think all of us are very passionate about working with the community, and all of us really, at some point in time, have had community work be in previous lives. I think the two main things that we see are that the community is not aware of federal programs or resources, and we try to drive resources to them. And I think oftentimes the federal government folks are not familiar with the API community. So we work to kind of build that bridge. And I'll give a simple example. Are folks familiar with the AAPI program? AAPI? No? Okay. So AAPIs do folks know what HBCUs are? Historically Black colleges, universities? Okay, so more folks familiar with them. AAPIs are kind of the HBCU equivalent, and I put that kind of crudely. But these are 2-year and 4-year colleges, universities that have at least 10% of their undergrad population Asian American Pacific Islanders, but they have to meet another definition where they're underserved and needy. So when you're talking about where are underserved AAPI students, they're at these institutions. So there's a specific program within the federal government that gives money to these institutions. We really work on making sure that everybody who's eligible knows about it, is applying. We try to bring philanthropy to bear to increase money and capacity for these institutions. So we really try to make sure that folks understand that, look, you need to serve these students. And I think especially for us, I love working with our interns. I don't run the intern program now, but I have for many years. I don't like accepting everybody from Harvard, Yale, Stanford, and I love those institutions, and I love the students who come from there too. But if we're really doing the work that we set out to do, which is assisting underserved AAPIs and all AAPIs, we want to make sure those folks have an opportunity. So I'm looking at where individuals are going two-year community colleges at AAPIs. Are they coming from underserved backgrounds? To make sure they have an opportunity to understand what we're doing, and hopefully that can leapfrog them into their next position and put them in a better position to succeed.
Now, I'll just add two quick things from CRAC is that one is really partnering and learning with educators. So we are, a concrete example is we're actually working with the Minnesota TFA community to actually be part of the orientation program for new core members. And to educate folks a little bit more on the needs of our students. And we're doing the same thing in North Carolina with a particular school district there. And then secondly is actually mobilizing together. So when we were pushing for data disaggregation legislation here in DC, I reached out to Sarah, who actually got TFA to write a letter to actually say that we really support this legislation. And in addition to that, last year at the summit, was it an AAPI summit? We had an action where we had TFA members join our campaign of saying, I'm not just Asian, Black, Hispanic, the typical or the standard race and ethnicity categories right now, and say, I'm Vietnamese American, I'm Bhutanese American, and really also take it into the life of its own. So I think that these cards are now branded under TFA, for example. So that's how we see it, is that it is a partnership to really both serve and to really advocate for change.
Thank you.
Cool. Hi, my name is Ravi. I taught for the last 2 years high school biology and chemistry up in Washington State. Plenty of AAPI around. Most of my students, actually probably a third of my students were coming from AAPI communities. Anyways, I was a little late, but I had a question that came to my mind based on what you guys said. So one of the things I struggle with is the dynamics within the AAPI community about privilege. We talk about privilege between Caucasian versus minority, but within our community we have that privilege where I'm Indian American. I know that tends to make more success in our country, but at the same time I connect with my kids because my family came from immigrant background. My dad grew up in the village with no shoes. My mom grew up in Kenya with nothing. So like they both actually came from poverty, but yeah, in America we tend to have more success rates, and I went to an institution with full scholarship to Northeastern, all these good outcomes, and I kept struggling with this throughout my teaching career, of like, how do I trust it? I had privilege, but I don't, we connected, I don't know, it's all so dynamic. Just, if you have any advice or anything to touch about that issue and my experience to yourself in your careers, curious.
I would say, I think it's so important to bring your most authentic self to your kids. And I think that no matter what that looks like, right, you are inviting conversation, you're finding intersectionality, right? That's important. When you're in front of any audience, you're trying to figure out where does your identity intersect with the people that you're talking to or trying to inspire/teach. And I think that when you think about how to deal with privilege or having more than your kids or success rates, I think that you have your truth, your students have their truth, and I think it's opening up the floor for these are our stories, and finding where you can find a common ground with them. Because at the end of the day, you are learning from them as much as they're learning from you, and you have to allow for that power dynamic to be broken. And I think that the only way you can do that is if you are opening yourself up and being honest with your privilege, and that goes for anyone, right? You have to address your own personal privileges before you can really have a conversation about power dynamics in this country, especially with kids. So I think that authenticity is very important and at the core of what you're doing.
Thank you. Next question. Oh, we have a line forming right there. It's exciting me right now.
It's all happening. Hi, I'm Christina. I'm actually a teacher in Honolulu, Hawaii. And so I know that for those of us that are in Hawaii, we actually serve also, like the gentleman before was saying, we serve large portions of AAPI communities. And I always think it's interesting because within that, there is, I think, a lot of internalized oppression with the model minority myth, a lot of pressure to whitewash or a lot of pressure to ignore one's background because it's seen as safer or it lends privilege or things like that, or just sort of a, oh, but the model minority myth helps me, so it's fine. I know that a lot of my students have that reaction when we talk about it. So I'd just be interested to hear your thoughts, like how do we push our students to start understanding that need for kind of self-identifying and things like that? Because I know especially with some of my Samoan or Micronesian students, there's kind of a desire to distance themselves from their culture because they think that it'll eventually help them move up, and it's sad. So, thanks, guys.
Yeah, I'd like to address that for sure. There is that environment, specifically even just the dynamics within Samoans and Micronesians in Hawaii. That's a battlefield in itself. But with regards to, how do we empower them to appreciate that? I think it goes back to, if there's opportunities to have folks highlight and kind of showcase who their communities are, and that may have to come from the teacher itself, like in your curriculum during like certain parts of the like history or something. If there's a piece that, if you have a percentage of X percentage of students in your class, see what you can do to bring into the classroom. So talk about bringing culture to the classroom. If you have a diverse group of students in your class, I know it's a little extra step, but maybe go to one of the festivals that they have in their communities. Mm-hmm. That'll help empower you, and maybe you can help shape those for these students to acknowledge who they are as Pacific Islanders in this case, because we have beauty in who we are. I didn't get to share it in my kind of upbringing, is that in that second grade, and I wondered why my name was Lepule versus compared to like Johnson or Thompson. I was embarrassed of who that was, but it wasn't until that teacher who said, give it a different spin. So I would say, outside of the household, and that's why I was a liberal studies major with a math emphasis. I wanted to be a teacher. Unfortunately, my calling was in the way of community work, but I would say going back, it's crucial for us as teachers to make sure that they also appreciate who they are, because America is made up of who we all are. So.
And can I just add on to that? I think thinking about like the role we have as educators, we're the only, outside of being home with their parents, like adults in their lives that they see consistently every day, besides the weekends, unless you hang out with your kids. But I think like thinking about the role you play when you are in front of the kids and like the stories you tell is what for them is like, oh, that's the most important thing because my teacher said it. So if you are being like tactful or you're being strategic about the things that you're choosing to place in front of your kids, like, again, the stories you tell will be the stories that they internalize. Mm-hmm. And that's so important. And I think that to add on to another thing that was said earlier, the first question that was asked, like, demand professional development. Like, I can assure, let me ask the question right now, actually. If you're an educator, raise your hand if your school actively promotes culturally responsive pedagogy in your building. Keep that hand raised if that comes in the form of monthly PDs. Right, that's depressing, right? And like, I think like as an education sees like being culturally competent as an aside or like ooh, that's an add-on to who you are, that's amazing, right? But instead, like we have to understand that like you cannot teach unless you are culturally competent, because the communities that I teach and that we are working with, right, are communities that have these very different cultures than like our American education system are used to like teaching. So I think it's very important to like in your own community and in your own school demand professional development, whether that is like you figure out someone from the community to come in and do the work for free, I don't know, right? But I think it's just so important for us to have that conversation, and I'm actually glad that Tommy Chang is here with us, my superintendent. He is in the room. Wait, I thought he was in the room. But I thought he was in the room. I thought that's why I'm looking. But if he were in the room, like I would really want him to know, like as a district, like we need to move in that direction.
If I could just add quickly to that, bringing in speakers from those communities, professionals who are successful, but having them also acknowledge that culture is important into their success.
Right.
Great, thank you.
Hello. It's weird hearing your own voice. My name is Mark Ampon. I don't sound like what I think I sound like. My name is Mark Ampon. I'm a current Bay Area Corps member. Born and raised, I'm a Pacific Islander, just like you. But what Tana brought up about civic engagement really struck a chord inside of me. When I see those statistics, I feel like I'm one of those statistics. I grew up in a low-income, very poor city. Almost didn't value my education growing up. And in my 31 years of life, I did not meet any teachers that looked like me until now, till joining Teach for America. And my question for you all is, because we all understand that mentorship is so powerful, you know, seeing and being and living with those that know your struggle empowers you to do better. So my question is how can we encourage more API representation in the classroom, in educational administration, and educational policy? Because the narrative and the dialogue I have with so many professionals in the Bay Area, when I got into teaching, they're like, oh, that's so sweet of you. You're such a good person. Right. But I think that story, that dialogue needs to be different. And how can we as professionals, as leaders, change that narrative? And what I was just curious about your ideas on that. Because we need more people in this work. We need more engagement, like you said.
Okay, I saw you looking at me. You know, again, it's modeling, it's encouraging the importance of the role. And I think one of the foundations that we use within our pilot curriculum is that kuleana, that sense of kuleana. It's our cultural responsibility. Yes, it's nice. A lot of our ethnic communities are, you know, encouraged to be doctors, encouraged, but teaching and the teacher, to me, I mean, next to our soldiers, teachers and soldiers are definitely underappreciated. I think how we address that is that we build kind of hope for our young folks, because again, you know, as echoed by our colleagues up here, that outside of the household, I say teachers are the next first point of contact as far as helping to shape and to guide the direction that our young folks are looking to go towards. But again, it's a matter of it's a community behavior change, or it's a behavior change. So it's on the psyche side of things, like how do we continue? And I think a lot of it, because we have very few like Pacific Islanders in the field of teaching, is to build those allies to encourage the Pacific Islanders, like the gentleman who has that Tongan in the classroom, emphasizing how it's important to give back and teach, because that's part of the culture. So how do you tie that into the work of like where they go professionally? Like myself, you know, I was a liberal studies. I was looking to get into elementary education. Unfortunately, no, not unfortunately, I can't say, because I would say that because I got into community work, I'm still teaching, but it's at a different kind of a curriculum. So stay the course and let me know. I mean, to everybody, with regards to Pacific Islanders, I'm open. I'm more of a, you know, chat behind the room, talk about somebody, or even check my phone, but I'm more casual kind of conversation kind of guy. So please count me as a resource. If I don't know, I'll find somebody. I'm the nosy guy in our community.
And I think I would add really rethinking outreach in the teacher profession. I remember and really connecting it to social justice. So when I was doing my Asian American Studies program at Berkeley, I know, right, go Bears. Not a single school of education representative came to our meetings to talk about why it would be so awesome to do social justice as an educator. And why don't these folks come into Asian American Studies classes, ethnic studies classes, to really talk about that as an opportunity? I think that would be a really, really big space where you can see a lot more change. By just dropping that little seed, like this is a way that you can really make a huge transformative change in your community.
Great, thank you, Quinn. I'd actually like to add to that. Less than 1.8% of the national teaching workforce identify as AAPI. Teach for America is uniquely positioned. 6% of our core identify as AAPI. I think to your question, my charge is we need to elevate the value of the profession, and we need our educators in this room to talk about the impact that you're having in the community. We need to amplify and assert our visibility as educators in the field. And I don't think many of our students or many of our peer educators understand the value that we bring to the profession. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that, but I would love to connect with you and connect with anybody else who would be willing to partner with us on the AAPI initiative and on our recruitment team to get the word out there and to invest more AAPI leaders to think about becoming classroom leaders. Thank you. So unfortunately, we have 5 more minutes. So we're gonna do a flash Q&A with the remaining 3 folks here.
I'll keep it quick.
Sure.
I'm Kelly Trung. My parents are Vietnamese refugees, and I was a 2011 core member in Greater New Orleans. And my question actually for y'all is, what's your experience been bridging or working alongside other communities of color in order to achieve a mutual vision of social justice?
So we actually work very closely with there are other White House initiatives, but their mandate's a little bit narrower, focusing more on education. But we have a great relationship with them, and I think we are very keen on sharing our strategies, working across our POCs and to show what works. And I think we get it. I think, to be very honest with you, when we're in meetings, I think there's a collective sense of underrepresentation, and I think we are very good about partnering together to ensure that the minority voice is heard. And I think, and I know we have 5 minutes left, so I wanted to get this pitch in as well too, because many of you are educators. ESSA was just passed, right? So every Student Succeeds Act, there are many provisions in there that impact our communities, all of our communities. So I would challenge you to please try to take a look at that and see in what ways you individually, collectively, or through TFA can provide input back to the U.S. Department of Education on how this is going to be implemented. Because there's another opportunity now, and I would hate for that to kind of go by missed.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm short. So my name is Mayura. I'm actually an incoming 2016 core member for DFW. And so as I was filling out all my information and identifying my race on the sheets, it kind of put me in a weird position because TFA actually splits it now as Asian American, Pacific Islander Native, Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, and then also Middle Eastern, North African, and South Asian. And so as a South Asian and also someone who's been very involved in the AAPI community, that's put me in a unique position where I wasn't even sure which one to pick. Even for the brunches tomorrow, there's a separate brunch for Middle Eastern, North African, South Asians. And as South Asian, that made me feel a little conflicted as to which one I was supposed to identify with. So I'm curious as to how data disaggregation plays into this split that even TFA seems to be doing right now.
So I'm not sure how TFA does it, but I can tell you how the US Census does it. So we currently have 7 categories, and for census, they obviously disaggregate it further, and they all roll up. So if you're I'm Indian, I'm Cambodian, and it has to be reported out, they count all those numbers, and you're in the Asian category. It is a little odd that, from what you're describing, Middle Eastern, North African, and South Asian are grouped together. Census is currently deliberating on whether to have a new category for 2020 census called Middle Eastern North African, but South Asian should be within the Asian bucket, and because from what you're describing, you're counted twice. So that should be clarified.
So I'll make this quick. My name is Tony. I'm Indy 2012. My biggest question, I run a spoken word organization in Indianapolis and in Boston. I just found out that you're in Dorchester, so we're gonna connect. And I'm just wondering, because at this moment, my epiphany is student voice is the untapped resource right now in education. So what are we doing as communities to empower that in the arts, specifically in the arts realm? So I was looking at things and researching for the National Endowments of Arts, and where's the funding go? Where does it come from? Is it from the federal government, or is it coming from grassroots initiatives that I can start myself, or both? So more for the White House initiative, I think, maybe.
Yeah, this is an area where I suck. But my wife is the artist. She's in a band and does all sorts of cool things, and I have no skills whatsoever. But in that space, in terms of resources, yes, there are, I think, some federal grants where they offer money for some of this work. And we have tried to initiate bringing into the arts in terms of our framework, and I think it's actually been quite exciting because it cuts across everything, right? And you bring in kids for dancing, or you bring in kids for painting, or even adults, and it just really brings a different perspective on some of our work. But I can probably I'll talk to you afterwards. I can give you my card and connect you with some of our staff who may have a better sense of where those resources are.
Great, thank you. So as we wrap up this incredible dialogue, I wish we could keep on going. Could each of you share in one sentence your call to action for our community?
I was prepared, I was ready to give a paragraph. I want to get real deep, but
Sure.
Read between the lines, okay? Know who you are And it's not until then that you can teach others about themselves.
That's good.
My charge is to support our community's self-determination. Because data disaggregation, it's not about these boxes. It's about the right for your student to stand up and say, I'm Vietnamese, Cambodian, Black American, and being proud of that, and knowing that we are redefining America. And two really simple things. Take a selfie. We can email you this, but actually, writing us a really short paragraph of why you think this visibility matters, that it's about self-determination.
That was longer than one sentence, Quinn.
I'm sorry. There were lots of commas.
Jesus. I would say if you want to assist AAPI communities, be the smartest person in the room.
That counts me out. That's why I sit next to Akil. So I have two, one for teachers. And just to go on the acronym, we're about acronyms. For teach, for you as teachers, I would say the acronym for that is truly explore a child's hope. Truly explore a child's hope. Hashtag that bad boy. And for me, as my own personal kind of goal or drive is to continue to build the pipeline, and we will come. So that's it.
Nice.
Yay, I'm just learning this. My generation was this.
So can we give them another round of snaps, please?
Yeah, I'm just learning this.
It's unfortunate that we're coming to a close, but I'd love to encourage you to continue this conversation throughout the summit. Please bring this conversation to your school, to your institution, to your teams, and to your communities. And before everyone leaves, I would love to suggest that we do a selfie with our experts here. I am short. Can I get someone who is tall, Wyman or George, to come up and help us out here? So we're gonna crowd around here. Oh,
To get the audience too?
yeah.
Oh, all right.
With the audience, yeah.
With the audience participation.
So can you all stand up?
Or even make your way towards the front.
Yeah, and make your way.
There you go.
Front, yeah. Yeah.
I'm not really good at this. Hey, you ever done the stick thing?
I don't. Okay. I know. Okay.
It's our opportunity to perpetuate the stereotype of tourists. So come on in, get close.
Come on, y'all.
Family style.
Emily, nice to meet you.
Wait, we have a lot of people.
Ready?
Put it sideways. It gets more people in there.
Yeah. And then it's you got 30 seconds on that.
Wave.
Wave, everyone.
What's the video?
No, it's a 3-second countdown.
Can you do one more? Just one more. 3, 2, 1.